Okay. I'm Meredith Roman. I'm a software engineer at Intent Media, and it took me 2 months from graduation to get a job offer.
Hi, my name is David Zausner. I'm a software engineer at Nielsen, and it took me around 2 months as well.
Hey there, I'm John Gruska. It took me a little longer, about 5 months, and I'm working at Google now, so I kind of stretched out the process a little bit on purpose, so not necessarily the best indicator of how long it could have taken, I guess, but it did, so yeah. And I'm a software engineer.
Okay, so these guys just graduated from their cohorts on Friday. So why don't you tell them a little bit about your full stack experience? Maybe we can start off with what your capstone project was. I know, John, you were in the Flex program, so maybe speak to that a little bit. And maybe say if that helped you in the interview process or not, if you ended up talking about it, how did it end up relating to the job search?
My capstone was a project called Garden of Code. We essentially created a like Code Academy clone that was gamified, so that every time you completed an exercise, like a little leaf on a plant grew. And it did help me some in the job interview process, because I got to work with Docker, so I could go in and be like, I've done stuff with Docker, or like, let me talk about this in a semi-intelligent fashion.
Okay, so we had a project called Newman, because we wanted to make a testy postman. So if you guys know, Newman is the character from Seinfeld. He's a postman. I love Seinfeld. So yeah, so the project was a way to test API endpoints pretty easily. So instead of using something like Chai or Mocha or whatever, right, you can just write vanilla JavaScript, send out requests to an endpoint, get back JSON, and process it however you want. Like, it just throws into a function, you just write it. And it really helped me out during my interview process, because my now manager was like, he's obsessed with architecture. So he really loved talking about it. And we architected our app with Electron, from GitHub. So it was a kind of a different thing, and we used it for scalability reasons, and he really loved that. So I like draw out the whole architecture of the app, kind of talk extensively about it, and I think he appreciated it.
Okay, so my capstone was called Crawlspace. It was an automated screen scraping, almost like a templating thing. So it kind of, there was a front end overlay that let you kind of disable the built-in functionality of any web page, and then you're able to highlight any data that you wanted to have. There's a process that later would gather that data and kind of save it for you. So it was a really fun project to work on. I think it indirectly definitely came into play with my job hunt and at Google. Even though I'm doing more of a back-end role right now, there's the project I'm on is planning to go into like an Angular 2 or I know you guys switched to React, so sorry, but definitely comes into play, and just in general, the exposure we had with dealing with APIs and what kind of goes on behind the scenes in the web browsing world was definitely very helpful. So.
Sorry, just a blast from the past back there. Okay, so let's talk about Reacto. So you guys obviously did that every morning, and then as a fellow David, I know you did it for the students. So was that helpful during your job search, practicing Reacto, and having to do it during the senior phase? Or maybe tell us some things that were helpful for technical interviews.
Reacto was helpful just because it got me feeling comfortable in front of a whiteboard. I'm definitely not, like, I don't come from a computer science background. I'm not an expert in algorithms, but it sort of taught me what that would feel like and let me practice that.
Yeah, definitely everything she said. And also, for me at least, it got me real comfortable kind of talking while writing. Because usually when I'm talking, I'm not thinking at all, right? So now I have to think, talk, and write, and kind of make it at least semi-intelligent. at least try to, right? So that's the whole thing. And for me, that was a huge step because I had to start building up my thoughts. And, you know, interviewers want you to keep talking, so you have to keep talking, and then you have to keep writing. And how do I frame, you know, the whiteboard, right? It's only X meters by X meters, only have a certain amount of space. So I got to make sure what I plan there makes sense and readable to the interviewer. So that was actually really helpful. And also, obviously, the whole, like, keeping your mind active, right? That was great as well.
Yeah, so I guess I could speak to the Reactos point maybe more than than most people, just because I kind of wanted to work for a bigger tech company, and they in particular really value the Reacto interview problem solving skill set. So for me personally, I think the Reactos were invaluable, frankly, and I kind of took it a step farther. In my cohort, we were kind of like a quirky, fun bunch, maybe even more so than the standard cohort. But that said, we kind of created like a Slack channel even after we graduated, and we kind of on our own would meet up and do even more Reacto problems. And I think definitely not only the problems themselves, but as everyone was alluding to, just having someone there who kind of puts a little bit of pressure on you, but at the same time is in the same boat as you and can help walk you through the process is just really, I found it really important.
What other resources did you guys use while you were studying for technical interviews besides Reacto?
God, I don't know. Honestly, just Google. I pass and I'll answer this when it comes back.
Yeah, so everyone knows cracking the code interview. That thing is dope. You know, keep at it. I also really, really liked Interview Cake. So what I would do is I would like go through my allocator free problems. I'd like clear my cookies and do it again. And then after a while, I kind of felt guilty. I was like, all right, I guess I should buy this thing. So that thing was really, really good because it allowed you to step through a problem. So you got the first bit and be like, all right, what's your runtime? Is it, you know, is it quadratic? Like, it is? Okay, then try again. And you say, oh, damn, okay, let me try again. So it kept you thinking, and it kind of walked you through step by step on how to get the problems. Only downside is there aren't too many, but they are still pretty challenging. And by the time you get to the end, you forgot how the beginning ones work, so it's nice to go back.
Cracking the coding interview for sure. Definitely dope, as you put it. I mean, the solutions are in Java, so I realized at first that might seem like daunting or like, but I believe online the author has JavaScript solutions, and I know for sure there are people both within full stack and out there that have solutions in JavaScript. And the core of the problems, it's really, for the most part, it doesn't matter what language you use, with the exception of the bit manipulation chapter. You could probably just skip that chapter completely. But yeah, no, I bought a whiteboard, or maybe more than one. Got to know it very well. Yeah, and then also Interview Cake was fun. I didn't sign up for it, but you get like a weekly problem, which is kind of nice. So if you don't, I made a habit of at least doing that. So at least once a week I was doing a problem. And then there are a lot of websites, or a few websites, that let you randomly pair up with someone online and do like a video chat and a collaborative editor kind of thing. The one I used was called Pramp, PRAMP.com. It's totally free. And overall, it was kind of like an extension of the Reacto process, I'd say.
Yeah, big ups to Pramp. That was also super helpful.
You guys studied way more than I did. I mean, mostly I just coded. Like I'd pick up various little projects, or once sort of interview like offers to do practice problems for the interviews, coding challenges came in. I'd just do those, and I'd spend like 3 days or a week focusing on that. So I didn't do so much with the algorithm study. I just kept coding, and I guess it worked out. It definitely did.
Yeah. Okay, so one of my last questions is, okay, why don't you tell us, obviously your best interview was at the place that you got your job at, right? So why don't you tell us about maybe your worst interview and what you learned from that experience going forward?
I interviewed at this company that they gave me a really weird problem that whiteboarding problem that I don't even think I could tell you now. I'm convinced they gave it to me to try and put me off balance and make me accept a really low offer. And then they came back with really negative feedback that was essentially, well, you're not as good as the people we give offers to usually, but we'll give you an insultingly low offer and maybe give you a raise in 6 months. And I said no. So yeah, don't accept a terrible offer.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's damn. Okay.
I was more complaining about the company than how I did.
Oh man.
It was a bad experience. I have a lot of praise there.
Man. Okay. So my experience, it was a rough interview. It was kind of my fault, but it was kind of theirs a little bit, I would say. So I go. They tell me to be there at X time. Let's say 9 o'clock. Right. So I get there at 8:58, and they look at me like I'm late. All right. So already it's off to a stupendous start. And the interviewer that I'm supposed to be dealing with has no idea I'm supposed to be interviewing that day. And this place, they don't interview normally like reverse a binary tree or something like that. So it's pair programming interview. But I don't know Vim, but they're using Vim. So I get to install my own IDE, but I have to set it up on my own. And I'm like, all right, let's get Sublime, but it's not working properly from the command line. So I'm forced to kind of go with Vim. And by this time, I'm already feeling kind of flustered. And it's in a language I have next to no experience in their actual code base, right? So in retrospect, I could have done a lot more to kind of get myself acclimated, right? I mean, I figured maybe learning just even a little bit of Vim, or at least just being a little calmer about the whole thing probably would have helped. But honestly, it was a rough interview. And I definitely felt pretty bad about it. But afterwards, I just realized it's just an interview. It has no real reflection on me as a person, me as an engineer. I mean, now I'm gainfully employed, so what does that say, right? It's that one moment in time that seems like the end of the world, and then you look back at it, and it's just not.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess I'll just pick up there. Totally agree with that. Both between Pramp and the practice interviews, Reactos, as I'm sure you guys have probably had one or two where you're like, oh, you know what? And the actual interviews themselves, I mean, it's inevitable. You're going to have a bad interview or two. And the fact that you're having bad interviews should be encouraging because it means you're going on a lot of interviews, I guess. But in my experience, I had 2 bad interviews. One was the interview and I were just not on the same page at all. It was an over-the-phone interview for Google, actually, the first one. And unfortunately, they gave me a second one because he basically said, okay, you have a stream of data. And I'm like, okay, what's a stream? And then that was like a bad start. And he's like, oh, you're doing this in Java, right? I'm like, no, JavaScript. And it was just all downhill from there. And it's also very hard over the phones. And I think a lot of companies, the initial interviews will not be in person. So that's a kind of a different skill set and can be much more awkward, I found. And then another bad interview I had was at a subsidiary of Amazon, and I had 4 out of 5 went really well, and this 5th one, I actually got into an argument with the guy, and I'm usually not very argumentative. He started correcting me, and I mean, I had been just going over these problems nonstop, so I knew my code was a very simple thing, and it wasn't JavaScript related, so I'm not going to go into the details, but so then I had this how do I tell him that he's wrong without doing so? So I kind of just went with it. So I did all these backflips in my code, and which I wasn't prepared to do. And then by the end of the interview, he looked it up and he's like, oh wait, yeah, you were right. And by then my code is a complete mess, and I was like a wreck. So I guess the point is you will have bad interviews, and just roll with it. So.
All right, so I'm going to give this out to the audience. Who wants to ask their first question? Okay, I think you raised your hand first.
Cool. Hi. So my name is Clement, and I was wondering if you could tell us 2 things. One, what were you doing before full stack? Whether did you just graduate? Were you working? Where were you working? And 2, how did that experience, or how do you think that experience helped you in landing the job that you're at right now? Was it instrumental or not at all?
That's a really good question, because we all have backgrounds, right, before full stack. Yeah, in my case, I worked for myself for 7 years. I'm a little older than most people, as are a lot of the people in the Flex class. So I'm 36, so I graduated college in 2002. I didn't have a computer science major, but I had a pretty decent had some CS fundamentals. Then in terms of working for myself, I think a lot of the skill sets I learned were a lot of personal skill sets and just a lot of those situational questions, like tell me a time you did this, and so that is a little more intangible, I think, and that definitely helped a lot. And then in terms of, I had some coding background, but the reason I came to full stack was to really just kind of reboot everything, refresh it, and get tapped back into the bigger tech world. Yeah.
Okay, so I worked in financial services for 3 years prior to coming to full stack. It taught me I didn't want to be in financial services. That was like the biggest takeaway. And in terms of the skills it gave me, I mean, it just kind of taught me, like, I'm really tense and anxious by nature. And I think being in that environment, it taught me that, you know, nothing's going to sound as terrible as a trader screaming at you over the phone. So it taught me to be like, all right, like, I can handle this. Like, whatever happens, what's the worst that can happen, right? Like, I went to school for finance. I worked in this industry for 3 years. And now I'm kind of not really throwing it all away, but I'm moving into something completely different. This is so new, so absurdly crazy. Like, what else can be thrown at me? So it kind of taught me to say, all right, fine, I'll just roll with it and just do what I have to do.
I actually did web development back end before I came to full stack, so it did help a lot. And I don't think I would have been considered for the position I got had I not had that background.
No.
Okay, who's next? I know you had a question.
So I had a question about the Vim thing. Did you know that they were going to ask you about Vim before you went into it?
No, that was just his personal preference. He's like, are you cool with Vim, right? And I was like, not really. He's like, all right, well, what do you want? I was like, Sublime. He's like, cool. And he shoved the keyboard over. He's like, go download it and set it up. I was like, I'm sweating a lot here. It was really fun.
I was wondering, during your job search, how much like your network came into play versus like just applying and reaching out yourself, like what kind of methods you used to reach out if you did that. And also you mentioned something outside of JavaScript, like if you had to learn other languages as you were applying.
I was recommended for the job I got by a friend of mine who works at the company, so it did really help to have an in there. I did get interviews from places I didn't have any connections at, so I think it's definitely really helpful, but it's definitely not necessary. But I'd also really, I didn't personally do this, but I know some people who have had some luck going to meetups and just like reaching out and growing your network that way.
So I got my job from a friend who referred me to his friend, and that's how I got the initial interview. But aside from that, I also had interviews through Full Stack's hiring day, obviously, and also just by randomly tossing it into like the digital void, right? Like you get reach backs sometimes, and they'll reach back out sometimes, right? But obviously, it's kind of like a low impact, low cost thing. Like you can send out like 30 of these resumes, and you pray that it's one of those places that doesn't even have an option for a cover letter, so you don't have to add one. And you're like, yes, that's so awesome, right? So like you can just send like a billion of these, and it's like really easy. But then there are also slightly more effective ways, like what Meredith said about meetups. Like I think those are pretty helpful. I went to one meetup, and it was at Spotify, and I got to meet like a lot of other cool people, and some that were not necessarily looking for jobs. Like they already had jobs, they wanted to refresh their skills. One guy came because he was looking for people, so like there are certainly opportunities there, and yeah, and definitely I would think that LinkedIn usually should be a good play, but for me, it just didn't work out. But I've heard of people getting it through LinkedIn as well. So.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. I was just gonna say that I mean, all the projects that you guys have done and or are doing, it's all designed very in a very clever way, because if you put the time into your LinkedIn profile and follow the instructions and maximize your profile, it's, for me, I did get some. I mean, it wasn't like my inbox was flooded or anything, but there were definitely some opportunities that came by way of LinkedIn. And then in terms of networking, for me, some of my best connections that I'd made were actually through here, through Full Stack. In fact, one of the guys in my cohort was a recruiter at Google, and we got to know each other over the course of 6 months. It was it's a little longer, the flex, but and yeah, so he was kind enough to to put my name past that initial firewall. And that's the other thing is, shooting the resume into the void for me did not work. So it's interesting. So, everyone's going to have a different experience, I guess. And you had a specific question about the Java thing, was it? Yes. Yeah. Okay. So that was that same interview is that same guy. He was most places, or I didn't go to a ton, went to a few interviews, and a lot of them just say, okay, pick the language that you want to pick. But obviously, if you're going to like a startup or somewhere where they're looking specifically for a JavaScript developer, they're going to want JavaScript, right? Which works, right? But this guy in particular wanted Java instead of JavaScript. So it's not like I had to go learn Java like in 3 months, which is probably not doable anyway. So, but yeah, so it just happened to be the exception to the rule, I would say. Yep. Doesn't hurt.
Oh yeah, just a quick note about the languages thing. So every place except for one, they were cool with whatever. The one place I kind of figured it out through Glassdoor, which I would always recommend as well. It's a resource, right? It's like you gotta look. Yeah, so I learned a couple lines of Golang. It was awful. It was awful. But,
Yeah, I had one place that it was a pair programming interview, and that was in Java, but we weren't expected to know Java. We were just expected to know enough computer science fundamentals that we could figure out Java. I wasn't the one typing, someone else was typing. I was just telling him what to type, so.
Hey guys. So I was just wondering, while you were applying and then after, how do you feel about the can we grab coffee and chat strategy to networking and finding a job? Does it work for you? Did it work for you? How do you feel about it now, having a job?
Okay. All right. So for me, it was a total bust. Okay. I can't even get a coffee and chat on a date. Like, how am I gonna get this for a job? And no, I'm just kidding. But like, honestly, I don't know. I would just be like, hey, like, you want to grab coffee and chat, and it would just be crickets. But again, I hear all the time people are like super receptive and they have amazing, connections. But it's just weird. Like, that's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles. Like, maybe I was asking the wrong people. Couldn't tell you.
I didn't try and grab a coffee and chat with anyone. If someone emailed me and asked me for that, I wouldn't be particularly receptive, just because it's not my style. I emailed people and asked them like questions about the places I wanted to apply, and I got I got a lot of like a positive response from that, but didn't try the coffee and chat thing. Hope no one tries it on me. I'm the worst.
I not 100% familiar with the coffee and chat. I don't know if it's a full-time thing, but the concept seems relatively simple to understand, so I'm going to go for it. I think the only time to be picky is when you're deciding what offer to choose. So I think it's nerve-wracking. I mean, all this is like scary, right? So, but that's a natural thing. So just kind of push through it, and I guarantee you, the more you do it, the easier it will become. It's kind of cliche, but true. And sometimes the best connections are the ones that are more personal, because again, you kind of leap over that initial barrier where they're just like, you know, checking through a million resumes and no one cares about you because you're just another piece of paper, you know. So I would say definitely try whatever possibly works. Yeah.
Anybody?
Are you currently using the language? Are you currently using JavaScript in your job, or have you had to switch and learn something new?
Yeah, I use JavaScript, just ES5.
Yeah, I'm doing some in React, and I'm just like, you guys can help me probably, but yeah, like I was so lost, and so yeah, definitely a lot of JS.
Yeah, so I applied as a back-end engineer only because I also have a lot of Java background, but the JavaScript is certainly coming into play. So the project I'm on right now is we're still building up the back end, but after a couple months, I'm going to be using a lot of Angular and JavaScript. Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Anybody? Okay, so can you tell us one thing about the culture of your company or your engineering team that you really like?
Everyone's just really fun and nice and silly. We all work really hard, but like our planning meetings are just absolutely hilarious because we get a lot done, but we make a lot of jokes while we do it.
Yeah, my team's pretty small. I have a pretty good relation with my manager. He's the one that actually sold me on the job, so I feel like no matter what I have that's troubling me, whether it's like personal, if I'm feeling down that like I'm working on this problem the whole day, it's not working, or if it's co-related or architectural, just talk to him about it. He's really cool. And I think just that his managerial style kind of influences the way I see the whole culture, which I think is great, but I'm sure there are not so great things as well.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys have seen the internship or whatnot. I mean, everyone hears about Google's, you know, great place to work, and for me, that's true too. The people seem really nice, a lot of weirdos, but I'm a weirdo myself, so that's all good. There's a huge blow-up Darth Vader, like 10 feet away from where I'm working. It's not mine. But no, the point is that it's like a fun atmosphere. But again, and people are treated very like adults, you know. So they don't watch every minute that you're at your desk or whatever. In fact, they encourage a lot of people not to stay at your desk too long. They get the juices flowing a little bit, but as long as the work gets done. And yeah, I just find that people are great. And that also goes, and something I meant to say about the interviewing process is that the people, for the most part, interviewing you are engineers. Like, they're not like these people it's only their job to, like, you know, like, oh, I got you. Like, you know, they're people. So just always keep that in mind, too, that they want you to do well.
So this question is kind of particular to Google, but so you always hear that Google is like, you know, one of the hardest companies to get into. They hire the best of the best, and so I'm curious, like, how do you feel that your boot camp on your resume? What do you think that looked like to Google? Like, do you think that that was a negative? Do you think that the fact that you had kind of a CS background helped a lot? And I guess this kind of goes back to my question from earlier, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna use this. You guys can all hear me? All right. All right. Sorry. Okay, so I'll try to answer as much of your question as possible. So I remember the recruiter telling me that, oh, full stack, we have a lot of people that, you know, we always love full stack. So for me, it was actually a positive. I don't know if that applies to all boot camps, but I guess it doesn't really matter for this room, people in this room. So that was certainly a positive. I think that, again, as to what I said before, just having a fresher, showing that there's a fresher skill set, being more in tune with the overall tech scene is very important, I think. But also my CS background certainly helped. Again, I didn't major in CS, though, so they saw it on my resume. From what I've heard, they used to be really kind of hardcore about like your pedigree or whatever, but I don't think that's really the case as much. And I can tell you my 5 interviews were all just solve the problems. Like it's if you you know, are looking to work for a company like Google or Amazon or one of the big, whatever, big four, big five, just, it's all about those problems. The problems are a big part of it. Let's put it that way. But certainly, you guys, I think, being full stack graduates are certainly, it definitely helps. Yeah.
Hello. So my question is about salary negotiation. Did you guys actually negotiate your salaries? Were you happy with what you ended up with? Did you want to do more? Or like how was that entire process for you?
They actually gave me more than I asked for. I went into the job search planning to negotiate no matter what I got, but they gave me such a good offer, I didn't negotiate.
Yeah, so as Liz and Jaren will attest to, I antagonized over negotiating a lot, and I bothered them greatly. Hey, can you take a look? Does this sound great? Am I coming off as a jerk? How much? So yeah, I definitely did that whole process. It is as nerve-wracking as I thought it would be, but then once it was over, I'm really glad I did it, right? I mean, it's so easy to say, you can give yourself like 10 reasons to not do it, but you make it through all of them and you do it and you're just like, oh, excellent. Like I have 0 reservations now. I have 0 regrets. And that was key. And I think it was a positive experience.
Yeah, I would say confidence is important. Also, keeping them in your mind, unless it's like a really slim, like brand new startup, the money means a lot more to you than it means to them. That's one thing. Just I don't know. I always kept in the back of my head. I also having a counter offer. In my case, I had a counter offer, which was instrumental and hugely, just did most of the work for me. But before Google, there was another company that I did really well in the interviews with, and they had an expectation of what salary range I was looking for, and then after the whole process, they came to me and said, "Oh, that number is actually too high." I'm like, "Oh, well, you guys reached out to me, and I put it out there, and I tried to negotiate, but it fell through." So I mean, it's just like any other part of the process, and it's exhausting because you go through all these interviews, you jump through all these hoops, and now, I'm almost there, but you know what? You're still not almost there. Like, so don't settle for something that you're not happy with, I would say. It's definitely, don't do it.
In the 2 to 5 months that it took you to get the job, did you? I was wondering if you would be willing to share like how many offers you got, and if you saw those offer like salaries go up as time went on, or what kind of trends you saw.
Let's see. How many offers? Well, I guess that one I just mentioned, which was an offer, but it was at a much lower number than even they were apparently willing to pay. Then I didn't have a ton. I mean, see, for me, it was Google, and then there was a subsidiary of Amazon. Those are my 2 big targets, and the process was very stretched out. So I didn't really have a lot of other offers. So it wasn't so much a trend, I suppose. But I was happy with both numbers. So I mean, I think that the market's certainly strong, if that's what you were getting at with your question. If not, then I'm not sure how best to answer that. But yeah, no, it certainly for me was there's a demand for developers out there. Yeah. So.
Yeah, so I had 2 offers, including the one that I took. I was in the process of others, and I just kind of let them simmer off because I knew that once I made up my mind, that was pretty much where I wanted to go. I just didn't really bother too much else. But yeah, there was no correlation at all. It was like just a scatter graph, right? Like everything was all over the place. And I think it just depends on exactly what the job is for and what industry and where they see you at. That was the only thing that I saw.
I got 3 offers. One was the one I mentioned before that I can barely even count. The other 2 came in the same week, and one was just dramatically better, so I took that one. And not just for the money, it was also the job I wanted. Sorry.
All right, guys, I think we're gonna finish this up. My last question to you is just if you have one piece of advice to give these new job seekers, what would it be?
I guess I would say what I hinted on before, just no reason to be afraid or nervous. You guys have all the tools you need pretty much. Just practice, stay and do as many, whether it's problems or just practicing situational questions or just networking or grabbing a cup of coffee or whatever else. Yeah, just stay active. Maybe a hackathon or whatever. Just pretend you have a job already, and just stay busy.
Yeah, that's really well said. Agree 100%. For me, a key thing was just remembering this, like, ego is the enemy, right? You don't want your ego to lift you or defeat you. And your mental wellness, your mental health, like how you see yourself in this whole process, how you see yourself, that's huge. Because you're going to be kind of like a little isolated, right? Like before you have this huge community, and now I wouldn't say like you're on your own, but like, it's a different thing. There's going to be time to adjust. So take care of yourself throughout this whole process, because it will grind you down if you're not aware of it. And you're so focused like doing these problems, and all of a sudden you realize you're like, oh man, like I need to take care of myself. So that's important. At least it was for me.
Stay in touch with each other too. Because I made amazing friends here, and we're all going through the same thing. Sorry. No. Yeah, that's it.
I actually have two pieces of advice. One is that you know more than you think you know. You're going to go into these interviews and you're going to think, people are going to ask you things that you don't know answers to. That's okay. You know a lot. You're really skilled. And the second is very, very specific, which is if you get a coding challenge, which you probably will, write a test for it. Just one test for the part it makes the most sense to write a test for. It really makes it stand out. That's some good feedback I got back from places that reviewed the code I wrote for them.
All right, so let's give these guys a round of applause. Thank you all for participating. I'm sure maybe some of you will stick around a little bit afterwards to answer some questions that you didn't want to ask in front of everybody. Yeah, that's it. Thank you, guys.